If you really want to do a report on the relationship between blacks and Jews, start with the transatlantic slave trade. Let's do it. So in 1991, Nation of Islam, led by Louis Farrakhan, published the book titled The Secret History Between Blacks and Jews, the Jewish role in the enslavement of the African. You can still find this online, but most shops don't sell it anymore because it's been thoroughly debunked. So the book argues that Jewish merchants and individuals either ran or had disproportionate control over the transatlantic slave trade. Let's look at the history. So in Europe, Jews were relegated to very few industries that included commerce, trade, and a large supply and demand during that time was unfortunately kidnapped Africans being sold into slavery. 4 Western European countries made up most of the slave trade: Portugal, England, Holland, and France. And historians found the names of about a dozen Jews that actually took part in the British slave trade. In the Dutch colonized Caribbean, that number jumps to about 6 to 10%. Jews mostly acted as middlemen, brokering arrangements, or small investors in slave-related businesses. Now that 6 to 10% accounts for 0.38% of the global slave trade. In fact, in 1995, the American Historical Association passed a resolution in Chicago. They condemned any false statement alleging that Jews played a disproportionate role in the exploitation of slave labor or in the Atlantic slave trade. This lie is nothing but an attempt by Louis Farrakhan, a notorious Jew hater, and the Nation of Islam to drive a wedge between blacks and Jews. They repeated a lot of these lies on HBCUs in the 90s. And the fact that they would rather try to smear the Jewish people than highlight the long-standing trans-Saharan slave trade that lasted from the 7th century to the 20th century inspired Europeans to take its market and still continues in the form of modern slavery today is, well, suspicious to say the least. The trans-Saharan slave trade lasted 1,300 years, 1,000 years longer than the transatlantic slave trade, which ended largely due to Christian abolitionists and slave rebellions. The Arab world today has the highest percentage of modern slaves per capita, with 1.7 million people in slavery right now. This is mostly driven by the kafala system, which allows employers to take people's passports, control whether they leave the country or change jobs, and allows them to be placed in illegal slave-like living conditions.